Welcome into this episode of the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Patrick Brown. I will be joined on this edition by Ryan Callahan. It is Monday of Mississippi State Week. Tennessee is coming off a 56-24 win against UAB at Neyland Stadium on Saturday, and now it is on to the road. Tennessee will play its first true road game of the season, its first SEC road game of the season, its first game in Starkville since 2012, the old Derek Dooley in a wheelchair game. We won't talk too much about that on this episode, but we will talk about some of Josh Heupel's early thoughts this week, also what we heard from some players on campus on Monday, and also some SEC scheduling news, reported SEC rivalries coming next season as part of the 9-game SEC format. Certainly the league will announce the rotations for the next 4 seasons on Tuesday night, but it was reported on Monday that the 3 SEC rivals for every team, those were leaked on Monday. So we will get to that. But first, we'll get Ryan in here. Ryan, what is your how are you doing to start this week, and how excited are you to go spend a weekend in Mississippi?
Doing well, and I'm actually probably more excited than most for this game because I've never actually been to Starkville. It's one of the last 2 places in the SEC I have not been. Didn't get to go in 2012. Had to be at a wedding that weekend, so having to miss out on the Derek Dooley wheelchair game, I am eager to get my first Starkville experience and see a whiteout, hear the cowbells and all that fun stuff. So probably would have been even more electric if it was a night game. Tennessee probably thankful that it's not, but yeah, interested in seeing what it's like. It's obviously not as big of a town as a lot of the places in the SEC, but I think that you've been there, right? It kind of adds to the charm in some ways.
Yeah, I've been to 2 games at Davis Wade Stadium. That's the name of it, right? I didn't butcher that. Yeah, I went to it was the 2002 game. The James Banks started that game. I think I went with my dad and some people, and we tailgated in a field. It was cold. It was November-ish. And we sat at I believe it was the very top row of the stadium. So, and that was like, I think it was like 17-6 or something like that.
Yeah.
Tennessee scored like a trick play or something. Jason Witten might have thrown a touch. I was in like middle school, so a long time ago, but I don't remember much from the 2012 game other than Tennessee couldn't stop. That wasn't a Dak Prescott team yet, was it? I think he was on that team, but he wasn't starting.
Tyler Russell.
Okay, yeah. So, but I think Dak was on that team. He might have played. Yeah. He might have been like he might have been their Tim Tebow, who they brought in as a freshman for situations, because that was the Dan Mullen team. And I remember that it was a 9:00 kickoff. I remember fearing for my life driving from Starkville to Tuscaloosa at 2-something in the morning, thinking if the car broke down, it was over. And then Cordell Patterson did Cordell Patterson things in that game.
Yeah. Now, I don't remember it, of course. I'm not actually recalling that game, but it was 35-17 apparently in that 2002 game at Mississippi State. So a few more points than you remember maybe, but I don't remember what the trick play you might have been referencing was. Maybe someone can help us with that later.
I think somebody returned a touchdown, or somebody returned a fumble or a sack fumble for a touchdown. Anyways, I'm already butchering this memory. But anyways. Tennessee's going back there. The stadium is much different now, from what I understand. They've closed it in, and certainly this is a different Mississippi State football team than Tennessee faced last season. When they played last season in Knoxville, it was 33-14. Tennessee didn't even need Nico Iamaleava in the second half. He was in somewhere near the concussion protocol, so they just had Gaston Moore finish out the second half and really just play defense and handed the ball to Dylan Sampson a bunch to get that one over the line after leading, I think, 20-7 at half. They hit a couple touchdowns early to Squirrel White and Dante Thornton. But this is a very clearly, I think, a much improved Mississippi State football team. They were 2-10 last season. They're 4-0 now. They have the win against Arizona State a few weeks ago. Arizona State is the reigning Big 12 champion and was in the playoff last season. Mississippi State was able to win that game late after throwing away a 17-0 lead. And Arizona State went and won at Baylor, so that's still a win that's holding up through the early portion of the season for the Bulldogs. But Josh Heupel talking on Monday just about the improvement from Jeff Lebby, his old offensive coordinator at UCF, just talking about how a lot of young players that Mississippi State was playing last season have continued to develop. They've brought in some nice pieces from the portal, and they just are in the second year of the system playing much better. And I think a lot of it has to start at quarterback with Blake Shapen, who Jeff Lebby got out of the portal from Baylor to be his quarterback. Tennessee didn't play him last year. He was hurt early in the season. I think it was a shoulder injury to his non-throwing arm. So, but he's back, and he has Mississippi State playing really well. They beat Northern Illinois 38-10 on Saturday. It's moved to 4-0. They are doing a wideout. I think it is, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but it's a homage to the Snow Independence Bowl game against Texas A&M from circa 2000. I also remember that game, but I'm not going to remember anything else other than it snowed, and it was on New Year's Eve.
It was high scoring.
Yeah.
I do remember that. It was something like 43-41 or something. It was an overtime game, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, you don't see many throwbacks to bowl games, but I respect that. That is a cool tip of the cap they're doing. So, I guess Tennessee will probably be wearing orange this week, right? I've not heard of there being an alternate uniform in the mix. We'll see, but they did wear smoky gray at LSU back in 2022. So maybe that's on the table for this week. But yeah, I would imagine you'll see Tennessee in orange on the road, and that'll be a little bit different.
Yeah, my guess would be that they would keep the military themed uniforms in place for that New Mexico State game. That's the salute to service game in November. So I don't know if they'll break those out. I would probably go all orange just to contrast the white, but we'll see. They'll probably put that on social media. Usually Thursday is when they do that. But Ryan, what do you make of this game? Just your early thoughts. Obviously, going into the season, this looked like a team, Mississippi State, that was how much more improved were they going to be? They obviously really had nowhere to go but up. They still lost 13 games, I think SEC games in a row. So they've got that streak to manage. They've got to do it against SEC competition, and I don't think any of their games last season were particularly close. So, what's the concern level on a scale of 1 to 10 about going into this game for Tennessee?
I still think, I'd say about a 5, because you still are going on the road in the SEC, but there are still bigger tests that await down the road. I mean, that obviously the win over Arizona State gets your attention a little bit. Just we'll see what Arizona State's season ends up being like, but that's probably not the marquee win that would grab your attention, but it's like, hey, that's an improved team. Makes you think they're at least capable of giving you a tough game. And let's face it, until further notice, Tennessee is vulnerable on the road. That's been their MO under Josh Heupel. They obviously had the loss at Arkansas last year, not a great Arkansas team, to go on the road and kind of lay an egg in that game. Now, the thing that gives you, I think, more confidence if you're Tennessee going into this game is you look like you have a completely different offense this year. Last year, it's harder to travel when you don't have a reliable offense, and especially a reliable passing game. That's where they lost that game. They just couldn't throw the ball very effectively. That was one of the games they didn't score in the first half, right? So having that kind of offense compared to this year's team, I don't think this year's team is quite as likely to suffer an upset in a game where they're facing an opponent that they truly have more talent than. But it's still a game you got to be wary of going on the road for the first time with Joey Aguilar. You've got to be on guard, because Mississippi State is playing noticeably better, and they're a more powerful offense this year. It looks like, at least somewhat, compared to last year. So they're averaging they're top 30 in the country in scoring offense. Not averaging just a ton of points, but scoring enough to keep things interesting. And as you said, got a good quarterback out of the transfer portal that's made them a different looking offense. So. I think this is one you've got to be ready for. This one, you can't let a team like that hang around until the fourth quarter if you want to make life easier for yourself. And if they do get into a 4-quarter game, all bets are off at that point, because we've seen this team lose some games like this that they're not supposed to on the road. South Carolina in 2022 obviously comes to mind. Getting blown out at Missouri a couple years ago, losing at Florida 2 years ago, I guess. So they've had some games where they've not been at their best on the road, but I guess if you have more confidence going into this game, if you're Tennessee, it's based on the fact that you look like a different team this year too, much like Mississippi State does, and that offense should travel better, you would think, but they've got to show they can do it.
Yeah, Mississippi State, I think, has done a pretty good job defensively, especially compared to last season when they were pretty porous. I believe they only held, Arizona State scored 20, I believe. Everybody else has been under 20. Of course, they've only played Southern Miss, I think Alcorn State, Northern Illinois. So this will be a different animal for them, the way that Tennessee is moving the ball and generating explosive plays, and the balance the Vols can play with. They could hit the big plays over the top. Joey Aguilar's obviously played pretty well, and the running backs have done a pretty good job. They struggled a little bit against Georgia, but I think a lot of teams probably will find it tough to run against that defense. Well, go ahead.
I was saying, in the familiarity, we talked about it last year a lot leading up to that game in Knoxville, but I'm not sure Mississippi State was in a position roster-wise to really take advantage of any familiarity Jeff Lebby had with Josh Heupel. But now, if the gap has been closed a little bit talent-wise, you do wonder how much does it come into play that Jeff Lebby obviously knows Josh Heupel and his tendencies very well. Could that be more of a factor this year, being a road game for Tennessee and being one that might be a little more competitive? Can Jeff Lebby, maybe take advantage of any inside knowledge or understanding of Josh Heupel's thought process that he might have? With that being said, Tennessee's doing different things on offense this year, so it's not the same offense that he participated in when he was on Josh Heupel's staff.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is not the same Tennessee offense.
No.
And so it's a different look. They still do some of the old classics. They haven't completely rewritten the thing, but certainly they're doing a lot more stuff. And Deshaun Bishop talked about that on Monday, how they've added different things and have different ways to attack defenses now. And that's working to their benefit. And so my concern level for the offense is pretty low. I think the offense will travel. I think you got a guy that's pretty even keeled in Joey Aguilar that continues, as long as he continues to give his guys chances to make plays down the field, Tennessee is going to scheme up those shots. They're going to scheme guys open, and those receivers have continued to make plays. My concern level is a little higher on defense because if I recall, even last season, I thought Mississippi State moved the ball pretty well against Tennessee and really, I think, ran the ball really well. As Jeremiah Thielander talked about on Monday, Mississippi State's going to spread you out. They won't do it all the time. And there's, I'm sure Jeff Lebby, kind of like Josh Heupel, has probably changed some things and is maybe doing some different things schematically, but they're still going to spread you out and make you play with some light boxes. And I think that allowed some runs to spit out. And they seamed up some runs last season against Tennessee more than some other teams against that pretty good defense. So Tennessee's going to have to be really sharp. If they have to play with some 6-man boxes, those linebackers are going to have to fill gaps. And Thielander talked about that on Monday. Just, you got to read your keys. And if you think it's run, you got to fill your gap and crash. That's a part of that RPO game that maybe Blake Shapen's a little bit better than Michael Van Buren, who's now at LSU, was the quarterback that Tennessee faced last year, was a true freshman. So my concern level is a little higher just for the Tennessee defense, just because this is an offense that Mississippi State that did move the ball a little bit last year. They're going to have a veteran quarterback that's maybe not going to be, Blake Shapen guided, he won the Big 12 title for Baylor a few years ago. So he's not going to be, the moment's not going to be too big for him. There's no defense that's really going to maybe throw him off, but that's maybe a little bit a bigger concern on my end for Tennessee going into this game is the defense.
Well, and to your point about Mississippi State's defense, though, that one sort of oddity of what they have done, they've allowed 300 yards in a couple games, but Arizona State didn't throw it very well on them. So they haven't allowed a team to throw for 200 yards yet this season. So that's interesting. And they've also got 5 interceptions. They've had at least 1 interception on defense in every game this year. So is this a really good secondary that's maybe capable of presenting some challenges for Tennessee? Obviously they faced Georgia, so you don't think they're going to face anything just insurmountable that they haven't faced already in that game, where Georgia's usually pretty strong in the secondary and overall on defense. But noteworthy, at least, that Mississippi State has put up good numbers in the passing game defensively. But yeah, I definitely agree that the bigger concern for Tennessee is on the defensive side, and that's just because of the injuries they've had. They just aren't quite the same team with all those guys out, and that's where a lot of this is going to come down to. Does Jackson Moy play this week? Does David Hobbs play this week? I don't think they're going to get back either of those cornerbacks for this game. Jackson Moy really is the one I think to watch this week, more so than even David Hobbs, but both of those guys, we'll see kind of how they handle them on the injury report starting Wednesday night. It's a big deal if even one of those guys can get back and play somewhere close to 100%. And that's the other thing. Even if Jackson Moy plays, is he going to be at full strength, or is this as it's been floated to me a couple times, maybe a pain tolerance thing where he's going to have to play through whatever he's been dealing with regardless, even if he's able to give it a go this week, or is that at least a potential concern? 100% Jackson Moy, that would be a big deal for this defense. If he's somewhere less than that, certainly helps, but how much better is he going to be than what they've been putting on the field the last couple of weeks? But just to have someone that can keep you from having to throw one of those freshmen in the back end of the rotation, that could be a big deal in this game. And having a veteran that's obviously capable of holding up against an SEC offensive line, that could make a big difference. But yeah, without those guys, they've been pretty human defensively. They've still been pretty good overall, but it's a very different looking Tennessee defense through 4 games than what I thought it would be this season. They've given up 17 points at least to everyone they've played. They've not been dominant. They've had moments of looking really good, especially with the pass rush, but And then in the Syracuse game with Colton Hood and some other guys making plays in the secondary, Boo Carter ripping out a couple fumbles this past week. They're doing some good things in spots, but it's just not a shutdown kind of defense like we saw a lot of times last year that makes you think, okay, Tennessee might not need to score that many points to win this game. You can see a team like Mississippi State scoring some points against this team, especially if those guys aren't back this week. And that makes this more of a concern, I think, going on the road.
Yeah, Josh Heupel was asked on Monday about Jackson Moyne, if he's trending in the right direction, maybe closer to playing, and Heupel gave his usual, just wait for the injury report. He was like, the injury, I think he's trying to think of the word availability, but he threw a whatever in there, which was, kind of entertaining. So that's where they're on that. We'll see about him. We'll see about Hobbs. We'll see about Ethan Davis, a guy that didn't play last week. He could be a guy that, if they got him back, could help the offense. Certainly, they played Jack Van Dorselaer quite a bit against UAB. Probably good for him. But one player that is ready for Jackson Moy and David Hobbs to be back is Bryson Eason. We talked to him on Monday, the 6-year senior defensive lineman, and I asked him if he liked, he's played 60-something snaps against Syracuse and Georgia, going through his snap counts from the last couple seasons. I think last season he only played, I think he hit 40 once in one game. So that's a pretty big jump. Him and Don Bailey are both playing a ton. And so I asked Eason if, do you like the rotation more, or do you like being out there on the field? And I feel like most positions, you ask a wide receiver that, you ask a running back. Peyton Lewis kind of alluded to this after the game on Saturday. It's like, we want to be out there every snap. Bryson Eason was like, man, I missed the rotation, was kind of what he said. So I appreciate his honesty, but he liked the rotation they've had where, you roll guys in and everybody's fresh. Maybe that was, part of the reason that they couldn't get that stop there in the fourth quarter against Georgia, if they had a better rotation or if they were able to trust some of those guys more. But we'll see if they get Moy back. And certainly there have been some signs. There were some better signs, I think, from some of those young guys, the Nathan Robinsons, even, throw in Marion Dye at defensive end. I thought Isaiah Campbell flashed a couple times in his playing time as well. So, those are some guys that certainly had a chance to grow in that UAB game. But an area where Tennessee, I think, as a program needs to grow is, as you touched on earlier, Ryan, is just playing better on the road. They have a history of some of these clunkers, but they've also gone and, they played LSU and beat them badly. They went at Oklahoma and dominated that game. I know it was only a 10-point game at the end, but there was that was a one-sided game, and Tennessee handled that atmosphere, which was pretty jazzed up for Oklahoma's first SEC road game. They handled it pretty well. So they've got to go out there and handle this one. And to Josh Heupel's credit, he was asked sort of about the unique noise, an offhand reference to the cowbells. And he said, hey, that's a great part of college football and SEC football is things like that make certain settings and stadiums a little unique. So they've got to handle that. But, Deshaun Bishop was like, hey, I love playing on the road. We like doing that. So do we think this team is ready? I know they've got bigger, I don't want to say bigger road games, but certainly they've got to go to Florida and Alabama later in the year. Is this a good first test to get them ready to learn how to win on the road? And this is a younger team too. So some of these guys haven't had to necessarily play big roles in some of these road games. Do we think Tennessee's ready to handle that aspect of this game?
Yeah, I think they probably are, because Joey Aguilar, again, is more battle tested. He's been a 2-year starter at Appalachian State even before this year, and he's faced high level opponents. So going on the road, definitely a different test. He wasn't experiencing many stadiums like SEC stadiums when he was at App State. So that this is a little bit different, but yeah, I think this team's better equipped to handle it. They've got a more veteran offensive line. I think that's one of the first places you look to kind of see, are you going to be able to handle that kind of thing? Lance Hurd has been in some battles. Sam Pendleton and Wendell Moy Jr. both played extensively at previous schools. And then, your younger guys are Jesse Perry and Sham Umarov, and they've been good to this point, Perry in particular. So you've got more guys who have kind of been in the trenches before in these types of games, to where even if David Sanders is in there, you feel okay. And if he's not in there, Umarov has been solid. Jesse Perry's been pretty good, frankly. And you've got 3 guys who were battle tested even before this year. So I think that's maybe the place you worry the most about it, because of the communication, the false starts and things like that. You can get rattled on the offensive line on the road, and it can make a difference. And just not being able to time the snap count too. Sometimes against an opposing pass rusher, you don't time it up well. You're just sort of off, and you're guessing or not executing well with your silent counts, and it can be a tricky thing for an offensive line to to anticipate the snap and be ready to go and not get beat off the line of scrimmage. So yeah, there are things like that you worry about, but I think this team's a little bit better equipped than most younger teams would be, and where they're less experienced is more wide receiver and some positions like that where yes, it matters to be playing on the road, but I don't worry about that quite as much as I do the offensive line and the quarterback. So as long as Aguilar doesn't look different and doesn't look rattled in this setting, I think Tennessee's more likely to be okay. And that's one of the reasons I think you give them a little better chance of not having a major hiccup in a game like this. If you were starting a guy like Jake Merklinger or George McIntyre, totally different story going into a game like this, I think, and we'd be talking about this as a very, very worrisome test, I think, for this. It's going to be, it's a good test, and the cowbells definitely throw a wrinkle into it for sure, but it's not, I don't think it's the type of atmosphere that worries you so much. It's not like going to the swamp for your first SEC road game like Tennessee had for years. That's a very different kind of challenge early in the season than going to Mississippi State. So I think it's at least a manageable game. And to me, the big thing is Tennessee continuing its first quarter offensive success. They've gone up big on everyone they've played so far this year. 83-7. They've outscored their opponents in the first quarter. If they keep up anything resembling that kind of success, you've got a chance to take the crowd out of the game a little bit early. So we'll see. Can they jump on Mississippi State the way they've done in their other games this season? I think that's a big part of this game. If they let Mississippi State hang around or make an early play that makes things interesting in the first half, that's where you get a little more concerned that the atmosphere might be more of a factor late in the game.
Yeah, Mississippi State jumped out, I think it was 17-0 at halftime against Arizona State. So a big start could have some flashbacks, maybe for the fans that, hey, you haven't won an SEC game since 2023, and even for the team too. That's still a program that probably is still winning or learning how to win a little bit. I think that is a factor that sometimes gets overlooked. But on Monday, Josh Heupel talked about the communication with the offensive line and said a lot of it's going to be on Sam Pendleton. And as you were talking, I'm thinking about how he at Notre Dame last season, his first start was at Texas A&M. So he's been in some of these big settings before, maybe not with the responsibilities, but and certainly Tennessee does a lot of signaling too to get some of their, get their wide receivers. But Heupel stressed that it would be important for the offensive line and the tight ends to make sure that everybody's on the same page and in sync and operating the way that they need to. But yeah, I don't know. They're not supposed to ring the cowbells during play. Like I don't know the rules or if they're followed. I said, because he hasn't played down there in so long, and I haven't watched enough Mississippi State games over the years to know when they're supposed to clang them or not. But Tennessee was pretty welcoming to it. Deshaun Bishop was like, hey, like I'm sure a lot of these guys grew up. They kind of know what to expect for going there, and they were kind of, a couple of players were kind of intrigued just because this isn't an SEC game that Tennessee has played very often.
Yeah, I think you have to be intrigued by this, and it's again, it's not a game like, if you were going to Texas for the first time, I think there'd be a lot more concern going just to a bigger stadium and things like that. If you hadn't played at LSU or Texas A&M or one of those places, it'd be a little scarier, I think, maybe for some of these guys. I don't think Mississippi State being a smaller stadium is going to get their attention as much, but yeah, it's different. Not a lot of guys have been there. They don't know what to expect. They've never heard the cowbells in person before. So it's got to be at least intriguing and something they're kind of interested by to see what it's going to be like to play in an environment like that. And yeah, again, you've got a team that's hungry, a fan base that's hungry for some success because they've not won an SEC game in a couple of years. They really struggled last year under Jeff Lebby in his first year. So to see a team showing signs of life, you remember what this fan base was like when Tennessee was at some of its low points. They were really hungry to get some of those wins when they had upsets over a ranked South Carolina team years ago, and when they beat Georgia back in about 10 years ago and things like that. You're more eager to get those big wins when you haven't tasted success in a while. So I think this is going to be a pretty hungry crowd and a pretty hungry Mississippi State team to have a chance to knock off a good Tennessee team. So yeah, it's I think they better be ready. Again, yeah, it's not one that should concern fans as much as Alabama or even Florida, just because of Tennessee's track record there, in my opinion. But I still think it's, Josh Heupel's track record on the road. His teams have not been as good away from home for whatever reason. And it is tough to play on the road in the SEC. So this team better be ready. They better show up ready to play. And if they don't, they'll end up in a 4-quarter dogfight. No pun intended, down at Mississippi State, because this is a team that's much improved and, maybe as improved as anyone in the SEC. And we'll see what that means on Saturday. We'll see if that means they're capable of keeping up with Tennessee for 4 quarters, but it is at least an opponent that has to have your respect and your attention going into this game, because they are they've shown they're dangerous enough to beat a quality opponent, and that's not something you could say about them last year.
Yeah, Josh Heupel was asked Monday if this is a tricky game, and he was like, "There's nothing tricky about it. This is a good team, and you've got to be ready to play every week in this league." And I think we've seen that there's a chance this league potentially this season could maybe cannibalize itself a little bit, and maybe beat up on each other a little bit. And I mean, I think it says everything about this league that the team that was picked to finish last just beat the defending Big 12 champion. So that's pretty telling about the strength of this league. And I don't think this game's sneaking up on Tennessee anymore. Maybe it would have earlier in the year, or if Mississippi State was, had started 2-2 and kind of looked the same. But I think they've probably got Tennessee's attention. But I think what has a lot of fans' attention is what's going to be kind of what we're going to learn about stuff well beyond this Saturday, and that's the scheduling format for the SEC moving to 9 games next season. The SEC Network is going to reveal the rotations for the next 4 seasons. So that's the opponents for everyone from 26, 27, 28, and 29. We'll learn the full 2026 schedule, I think, in December is the league's plan. But the permanent annual opponents, whatever you want to call them for everyone, were leaked out on Monday. Chris Lowe of On3 first reported what everybody would get. And for Tennessee, that is Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky. Ryan, we discussed this last week on our mailbag podcast. We said that's the 3 it should be. We were kind of skeptical that that's what it would be, just because we thought other teams, other schools would point to Tennessee and say, hey, that's not fair. They've got an easy draw. I think it's important to remember that the SEC is going to, I think, review the setup every 4 years. So at some point they might change those 3. And I think certainly Alabama, LSU is, I think, one of the big casualties as far as an annual game in the SEC. Tennessee is going to lose the Florida and Georgia games. Fans probably have some mixed feelings about that, given how those series may have gone. But I think if you're Tennessee, you've got to be pretty pleased with the draw you're getting. Now, you might not be pleased when you find out what your rotation is, and you might have to play Texas, LSU, Auburn. You're going to be facing more of the bigger dogs in this league moving forward. So I would caution anyone that thinks the schedule is going to be easy at this point. I should note, too, that Danny White, I believe, before the game on Saturday on one of the Vol Network shows, said that Tennessee is getting 5 SEC home games next season, right? Is that correct, Ryan?
Yes, that
so
is.
they will have that pair. They will have 5 SEC home games paired with the Georgia Tech game in Atlanta. We'll still have to see if that's going to be in the Dome or if it's going to be on campus down in Atlanta. But then that means in 27, Tennessee will have 4 SEC home games, but Georgia Tech at home too. So you're kind of looking at a kind of the way I think they've got it set up is that they're going to have 5 Power 4 home games the next couple of seasons, which I think will be good for fans and more bang for your buck in terms of season tickets. But Ryan, what's sort of your thoughts on Tennessee getting these rivals? I think if your tradition is what your number 1 point, then I think Tennessee had to get these 3 because those are the only 3 teams they played over 100 times and really well over 100 times.
Yeah, I agree. I think that always made the most sense. You just didn't know how much the competitive component and fairness was going to be a discussion in all of this, and how much that might outweigh the history. But yeah, if you're trying to preserve history, those are the 3 opponents that always made the most sense. Now, you could make the case for recent history and what the significance of the Tennessee-Florida rivalry has been since the 90s, but to me, that's the only one that made any sense to replace Kentucky. But let's face it, Alabama, obviously, a ton of history in that one. Third Saturday in October. That's that secondary rivalry for Alabama that this now protects. Whereas if you'd only had one permanent rival, Alabama probably would have gotten Auburn, and this series may have gone by the wayside. So this definitely Tennessee Alabama was going to be the first priority, and then Tennessee Vanderbilt as an in-state rivalry that had to make the most sense. And then, again, let's face it, Tennessee Kentucky was a trophy game until the 90s, until they got rid of the beer barrel. So
bring it back.
Yeah, they should bring it back. But I mean, you're serving beer at stadiums these days. What are we doing? But I think I think the fact that you've got that kind of history to this series, and again, if Kentucky doesn't have Tennessee as a rival, who's a rival for them? Kentucky's been in the SEC too long to not get some sort of say over having a rival on its schedule. They're not a newcomer. They're not Missouri. They're not Texas A&M. They've been in this league for a long, long time. Bear Bryant coached there. So let's give Kentucky the respect of at least letting them have a legitimate rival on its schedule. But yeah, you just didn't know how much the Alabamas of the world were going to look at it and say, hey, we're going to play probably Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. how's it fair that Tennessee's going to get Vanderbilt and Kentucky every year? So I think a key component of this, though, is that they are going to evaluate it every 4 years. And so maybe the door is open to this changing in the future if the results are outlandishly one-sided for some teams over the others. And I'll be interested in seeing how they kind of approach that, whether they are that worried about balancing out the records and things like that, or if they're still going to favor history in the long run. So it's a fascinating discussion. I think Tennessee has to be happy with how it's turning out. But one other thing to add, Danny White did say Thursday on the Mike Keith show leading up to Saturday's game that because of what you were saying, the way it's set up with Georgia Tech, Tennessee's intention is to have 5 Power 4 home games every year. So they're planning to stay on that rotation. Whatever they do, if they have home and away series, they'll try to balance those to where the years they have 5 SEC home games, they'll go on the road. The years they have 4 SEC home games, they'll play that 5th Power 4 opponent at home. So that's going to be the expectation. That should make a better value for the fans who are season ticket holders. You want to make sure you're asking fans to pay a lot of money these days for season tickets and donations and all those things. You want to make sure you're giving them bang for their buck, and that's a better value for sure to have 5 Power 4 opponents coming to Neyland Stadium every single year.
Yeah, so they would have 5 SEC home games and at Georgia Tech in 26, then 4 SEC home games with Georgia Tech coming to Neyland in 27. In 28, they would have the 5 SEC home games plus the neutral site game at West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And then in 29, they would have 4 SEC home games plus Washington coming in. There are a few fans on our message board on Monday that were they've been scarred by Tennessee getting out of the BYU game and Nebraska canceling that series, that think that series with Washington for 29 and 30 will never happen, but hopefully it does.
But you know what? I think that's a positive that you're hearing Danny White talk about it in those terms, because he's making sure he's getting out in front of it and saying we're going to have 5 Power 4 home games every single year. That suggests you're having to play home and home series, because you're not going to get neutral site games and have it work out that way every other year where you're getting that team to come to your place. So that I think they're going to keep some of these series if they can, and that's going to be a priority going forward to make sure that you're finding non-conference opponents who are going to be willing to stay on your schedule, because you need those teams now. You got to keep playing Power 4 opponents to satisfy the SEC's requirements. And Danny White's made it clear he doesn't really value those neutral site games. He wants teams to come to Neyland Stadium. And hopefully that means there's going to be some interesting road trips that actually stay on Tennessee's schedule in the coming years.
Yeah, I don't think Tennessee wants to get out of that Washington series. I think the concern would be that Washington pulls a Nebraska, because the Big Ten is, we saw what Nebraska, their stance was basically, hey, we don't want to play this game. What benefit is to us? So hopefully that doesn't happen with that Washington series. But I'll be interested to see on the reveal on Tuesday, how do they do it? Is it just going to be you have like your 2026 opponents will just flip in 27, or do you not see them again until 28? That'll be something I'll be interested in seeing.
My guess is it will alternate. I think you'll see 26 and 28 be the home and away, and then 27 and 29 paired together. But we'll see. I agree. That's interesting, but that's my guess as to how they'll do it.
Yeah, well, that will be my question. And then also, who does Tennessee get? I hope the league, you just had sort of a 2-season window of familiarity. Easy for me to say. I sound like Butch Jones trying to say it. But do they, Tennessee's just played Mississippi State, Arkansas twice. Are they going to get, the teams that they haven't played under this last 2-season rotation? That's sort of the question I would get. So that's why I would caution fans that think, hey, we got a great draw. We got Vanderbilt, Kentucky every year, because you might be swapping Mississippi State, Arkansas, Oklahoma for Texas, LSU, Auburn, and all those teams.
That's my guess is you're going to see Texas immediately rotate onto the schedules of the teams that have not played Texas so far. So my guess is you're going to see Texas playing Tennessee next year, and that will be whether it's home or away. That will obviously be a tough game if that's the case.
Yep. Circling back to Mississippi State, that this setup is it's going to eliminate the going 13 years between Tennessee going to Starkville, because you're going to be playing everybody home and away over a 4-year span. That was an emphasis for the SEC, and whether it was 8 or 9 games, and they certainly will do it with the 9-game schedule with 3 permanents and 6 rotating. So we'll have plenty of reaction to that on Thursday's podcast, and also more of a preview for Mississippi State as well. So before we leave, I encourage you guys, wherever you're getting this podcast, leave us a rating and a review, and subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to our channel there as well. We will have plenty of coverage throughout the week, scheduling stuff, preview stuff from Mississippi State, Ryan's recruiting stuff because that never stops. So we will have plenty of coverage throughout the week getting you ready for this big SEC road game. And we will obviously be in Starkville on Saturday to bring you some coverage from there as well. So appreciate everyone out there listening, whether you're loyal, whether you're new. We appreciate you, whether you're subscribed to the site or not. We appreciate you listening to this podcast and hope everyone has a great week. For Ryan Callahan, I'm Patrick Brown. We'll see you guys next time.